Hi friends, thank you for joining me. Today we are decorating our fairy garden cookies. Before we get started, I always like to do a quick inventory check. Let's make sure that we have all of the supplies at our ready so that we can get right into decorating. We have our 6 cookies here. I have all of our colored bags. These are the flood bags. I also have all of these colors in outline consistency as well, including the 1 bag of yellow. We only need the outline in this consistency, not the flood. So we have white, ivory, pink, green, blue, purple, and brown. Over here I have my water bottle, my scissors, my scribe, paintbrush. I have an edible marker here just to mark out some of the lines, just to make it easier to visualize where we're putting those sections on our cookies. And here I have edible moss. Okay. Now, just to go through a quick run through of how I run the class, we will complete this entire set from start to finish in one setting. I actually like to flow through the set, building one section at a time so that we can build those details, build that dimension into the cookie. When they are not in front of me, I have them placed in front of a table fan. This quickens the crust, it locks in that shine. So if I'm not actively working on them, they are in front of that fan. If you have a dehydrator, that could also work. I find the table fan works just as well, but whatever your preference is. Okay, so before we get started, I'm gonna take a moment and open up these bags. I just want to show you how small we are opening these bags. So the outline, we want a very small hole. We can start small and we can open it up if you need to. And the reason why we want a small hole is, we want little dainty details. We don't want big chunky details on our cookies because the outline bag doubles as our detailing bag. Also, when we are outlining our cookies, we want to hide that outline when we add our flood. So when we go in there with our flood bags, it's going to marry in with that outline, and that outline is going to disappear. We don't want to see that line. So the smaller the outline, the easier it is to make that line disappear. Same thing with the flood. I do not like to open my flood bags too large because you can easily lose control over the flow of icing. So I like to keep my flood bags on the smaller side as well. Okay, so let's start with our outline. I grabbed my blue color. Okay, this is a 10-inch tipless piping bag. So we have this one seam here. We want to face this towards the ceiling, and we want to flatten this bag against the seam. Okay, and then with our scissors, straight across, we're only cutting off a very little hole. So you can see how small that is. Okay, same thing with the blue. Here's our blue flood bag. We're going to find that seam, pinch the bag against the seam. Now this one we're going to cut a little bit bigger. We're going to go straight across. Okay, so there's our flood. Here's our outline. So you can see the difference in size. Okay, so let's take a moment and open up all of these bags so that they are ready for us to decorate. And once we're done, we'll get straight to it. Okay, I have all of my icing bags ready to go. Before we start decorating, I just wanted to bring in the final set into view. There's a few things that we want to prepare on our cookies before we go ahead and start outlining and flooding them. So, for example, on our mushroom house, see this little bit of blue behind the window? We're going to take our blue flood and we're going to paint the cookie so that that blue is coming through the window. We're going to do the same thing on our watering can. You can see that little bit of white here and here. We're going to paint some white icing behind here. And there's 2 reasons why I like to do this. One, I don't like to have naked cookie showing. I just think it makes the cookie look incomplete. So I always like to have some sort of icing on the cookie, whether it's painted on or it's flooded. And the second reason, because I don't want the cookie exposed, I don't want it to dry out in those areas. So this kind of puts a little protection on the cookie and keep it moist so that it doesn't dry out. Okay, so that's our watering can. And we're also going to do the same thing on our garden door. So for this cookie, we're going to outline the door, and before we flood it, we're actually going to paint this section and get the moss down first. And the reason why we want to get the moss down first is because if we were to flood the door and then go in and add the moss, this is still going to be sticky and tacky. So it's really hard to contain these crumbs and it will stick to the door. So we actually want to get this moss laid in first so that when we flood the door, it stays, flooded without the moss sticking to it, because it's very hard to get those crumbs off the door if it's tacky. Okay. First up, we have our watering can. So let's take our flood icing, and we want to use the flood icing because it has more moisture on it. It's easier to spread the icing when there's a little bit more moisture in the icing. So we're going to do these areas right here. You only need a little bit. You don't need a lot. You can always add more, but if you add too much, it's very hard to, you're going to have a lot of excess and it's going to be a little bit trickier to paint. So start little, and we're going to paint this area here, and we're actually going to overpaint. So we want to go, I'm bringing this into areas where I know it's going to be flooded with icing in the future, but I want to make sure that no cookie is showing through. So I actually overpaint just to ensure that there's no little unpainted areas. And we're going to do the top here. A lot of the florals are going to sit up here, but some areas shine through. So I like to just get all of this painted, and then I'm guaranteed to not have any bare spots. And this dries very quickly, so I'm not even going to put this in front of the fan. I'm going to just stash this onto the side, and by the time I'm ready to move on, this will be dry. Okay, let's grab our mushroom house, and we're going to do the same thing but with the blue. So I know my window is going to be right here, so I'm going to put a little dollop of blue right there. I'm going to wipe my paintbrush clean from that white, and I'm going to paint this area. And like I said, I'm going to do a bigger surface area, so when I pipe that circle, I know that all of this blue is covered. This whole area has the blue. Now I want that to be a little bit bluer, so I'm going to go in with a second layer just to brighten that blue up a little bit. Okay, that looks much better. Okay, so we're going to sash this off to the side, and we're going to let that dry as well. Okay, here is our fairy. Now I have my edible marker here. I want to go in, you can see all of these little sections, and we're going to pipe and flood these one at a time. We're going to do one section, let it crust, build the next section. So you could see all of these dimension and sections. We're going to do one of these at a time. Okay, so just to help us visually mark out these areas, I have my edible marker pen here, and I'm just going to lightly sketch out where these pieces go. Okay, so I know this is her hair here. Okay, now we want to bring this up just a little bit, and then we're going to bring this down, and this is the bottom of her face right here, like her chin and her cheeks. Now I don't want to put the black there. I'm just going to bring this here. Okay, so there's her face. This little bit right here is her neck. This is the top of her dress. This little bump right here, this is the top of her dress. Okay, now right here, right in this section here, this is where her wings connect to her shoulders. So we're going to, I'm just going to do a light sketch, bring this up, and then there's one wing right here. So there's wing one. And then we know this is the outside of her dress. Okay. There's the bottom of her dress. Now she's flying, so her dress is blown in the wind a little bit back here. And then right here, by adding that dress detail, we created the second wing, okay? Now here, we have her two legs. And then we'll add her shoes one at a time. Now all of this up here is her hair. Okay, so I don't like to add too many lines into my sketch here, you know, just in case the icing, we don't want to see these lines through the icing. So I did enough just for me to get the general shape of it. So now you can visualize what she's going to look like instead of freehanding it. Okay, so now we're going to start with the sections because she has a lot of sections. So in between each section, we are going to put her in front of the fan, let her crust over so that we can keep moving on so that she's finished by the end of class. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I actually want to do her neck first because when I go to pipe in her face, I'm going to bring her face down a little bit over her neck to give it some dimension to make it look like her face is coming out from her neck. Okay, so this little area right here, I'm actually using my outline bag because it's such a small detail. We have better control over the outline consistency. There's some moisture in this, so it'll be enough moisture that it smooths out, but it's not the flood consistency, so it's not going to spread on the cookie. It's going to be contained exactly where I put it. So we're only putting that little bit of icing right there for her neck. Okay, so we can actually work on a couple sections here that aren't touching each other. So I have her neck. I'm going to do this leg right here. I'm going to pipe this down. Now I know her shoes are back here or down here, so I'm going to stop about right there. Now with the outline, we're doing everything with the outline in this step. I'm going to go back and forth a couple times, really build up that icing. We don't want to be skimpy with the outline icing when we're doing these details. We want them to be nice and puffy. If you were to be pretty skimpy, it would be really hard to smooth this out. So volume is key. You want to go do a couple passes with the icing, let it build up, and then just let it settle in on itself so you can see how nice and smooth that leg is using the outline. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is the top wing. It barely touches the neck, so that's okay. So with my white outline, I am going to outline this top wing. Now I want to lose that black line in this step. So make sure you're going above that black line. We want to hide it underneath this icing. So there's our wing. Now with our white flood, we're going to go straight in. Now with your flood, you want to get close to the cookie. And we're going to squeeze so that it touches that outline. We want these two consistencies to touch and blend in together. We don't want to see that outline line. Okay, so let's bring this in, fill it in completely. We don't want to see any bare cookie. If you're seeing cookie, you don't have enough icing, okay? Give this a good little shake. That's going to help settle out that icing. And then we can go in with our scribe if we need to touch up any lines. We can go in with our scribe, and you can see I'm not going back and forth. We don't want to spread the icing. We want to rotate the icing. So put the scribe in the icing, and in a circular motion, we're going to push it out to the edge, and that's going to help move the icing and shape it up so that it goes right out to that edge. Okay. So this is all we're going to do in this step. We want these sections to dry. When we come back, we will add her other leg and this other wing, and then we'll get her face piped on. Okay, moving on, we are going to start working on our snail. So you can see he has a lot of dimensions as well. So we want to build up that shell. He has two distinct parts of his body. So I have my edible marker here, and I'm just going to etch out these lines, okay? So right here, this is the top of his head. We're going to make this white, okay? Now here's his body. We are going to bring this down. And it's going to come right here to this little area right here. Okay. Now right here is his face. Under here's like his chin. We're going to cut this in just a little bit. And then we're going to bring this down and over. And bring that right down to the edge. Okay, so you can see this whole section here will be the blue, this will be the tan, and then his shell. Okay, so you can see right here, you can see how that blue kind of sits up over that tan. So we want to get the tan in there first, and then we'll come back and get the blue. Okay, so let's grab our tan outline. And we know that it starts down here. So I'm going to start with this black line. I'm going to touch with the outline. I'm going to lift up this bag. So to get a nice even flow of icing, we're going to touch to anchor the icing to the cookie. Then we're going to lift it up just a little bit with a medium pressure. We don't want to go too hard or it's going to curl out. And then we're going to pipe a nice straight line. Now I'm going to tap to detach right over here, okay? Now over here, I'm going to now I'm lifting it up, and I'm going to be very close to the cookie because I want to follow these ridges on the bottom. So at each bump down here, I'm actually tapping to anchor the icing in that spot. Okay, we're going to bring that over and touch. So there's our first section. Now with my tan flood, I'm going to go right in. Now because this is a skinny area, I don't want to over flood. I'm going to squeeze this thick and let it just fill in that area. We don't want to be heavy with the flood. We don't want it to come over the edge. So I'm just adding a little bit here just to bulk that up a little bit. Okay, then we can give this a little shake here. And then with my scribe, I am going to take some of this excess icing and I'm just going to round out these bottoms a little bit. Really bring in that detail. Okay, so there's the bottom of our snail. Now I want to get that little bit of white up there. His antennas are going to sit up here, but first we need to get this white in here because again, I don't like naked cookie, so I like to have a base. Now you can paint this area. If you want to paint this area, you can. I chose to flood it. Okay, we have that outlined. Go right in with a little bit of flood. fill that in. Now, if at any point you are outlining your cookie and you don't like it, if it's wobbly, if it's not all the way to the edge, if you don't like an outline, wipe it off. You know, don't try to make a bad outline work. Okay, you can easily wipe it off. You can scrape it off with your scribe and redo it. Okay, so here's our two sections. We are going to let these crust over, and then when we come back, we are going to add the blue to his body and then his shell. Okay, moving on, we are going to start our flower cookie. So as you can see, this is completely flooded. So in this step, really easy, we're just outlining and flooding. And then in the next step, we are going to start adding the flower details. Okay, so the base color is white. So we're gonna grab our white outline. So you always wanna start at an edge. So somewhere where it makes sense for the line to start or end. So I like to start right here. I'm going to tap, lift up that icing bag, and I'm going to follow the shape of the cookie. I'm going to tap here, anchor that icing so that I can switch directions. I'm lifting up that bag just a little bit, and tap in here. Tapping here. Tap in there, and it's just a gentle tap. You don't even need to hover in that area. You don't need to squeeze the bag hard in that area. Now I'm going to come down here, tap, bring that out, lift up, okay, so there is our outline. Now there's some moisture in the outline, so maybe if you didn't get all the way to the edge, there's some give in that outline so that when you go in with your flood, you can rotate that icing out to kind of hug the edge a little bit better. So you're not locked into this outline. There is some give for you to move it around on the cookie. Okay, so we're gonna go in with our white flood. I'm going to squeeze. Now I like to squeeze this thicker, let it come out thicker so that we get more coverage. We're going to squeeze, let it touch that outline. We're going to work our way around the cookie. Now it sounds intimidating to go quicker, but with royal icing, it dries quickly. So you want to get that icing in there quick so that you have more time to smooth out that flood and perfect those edges before you give it too much dry time, because once that starts crusting, you're going to be fighting that icing. Okay, so once I get that first pass done, now I'm going to pick up my speed. I'm squeezing this bag. My goal is to just get this cookie covered. Now it looks pretty bumpy here. I'm going to take my scribe and I'm going to jiggle this cookie, and that is going to help this icing smooth out. Look how nice and smooth that came out. Now I have my napkin here, wipe off that excess. So now I have this peak here. We are going to gently feather the top of it, and I mean barely touch it. That little touch helps it melt right down into that flood. So now if there's any edges that I want to soften up, like right here, this didn't come out all the way, I'm going to gently take my scribe and feather that out. Same thing over here. Now let's just rotate so you can see what I'm seeing here. Now if there's any edges that you want to bring out, if they're not completely out to the edge, you can, like right here, it's not completely out to the edge, so I'm going to show you what I do. I add a little bit of fresh icing, give myself something to work with. Now with the scribe, I am going to go in there, push it into that flood, and I'm going to rotate this out to the edge and just shape up this corner right here. If there's any flaws in my flood, Most of those flaws can be fixed with just a little bit of fresh icing. So here's another little dollop, and I'm just wiggling that in, forcing that into the original flood, and I'm rotating this out to the edge. And see, you can see how nicely that blended right in. I'm going to do the same thing right here. Now sometimes it's starting to crust, so you just want to tap, kind of break open that crust, force it in there, and then rotate it out. Okay, so here is our flooded cookie. We're going to let that crust over, and then when we come back, we are going to start working on the flour one section at a time. Okay, circling back, we are back with our fairy. Every couple steps we want to circle back to our fairy just because she has a lot of sections. So now we are going to build in our next layer of icing. So I have my tan. We're going to get that other leg piped on. So we're going to follow that black line of the dress, and we're going to bring this down right behind this other leg. And then I'm going to squeeze that thick. I'm going to do a couple passes, just build up that volume. Kind of tap so it can settle in on itself. You can give it a little shake. And then with the scribe, we are going to go in and just soften up these lines. And bring them together. So now she has two distinct legs here. Okay, the next thing we want to do is pipe her face. So we know this is her hair right here. So I'm going to start right here. I'm going to follow that black line. We're going to bring it up over here. We're going to go right on top of her neck. And then we're going to close it in over on this side. So there's her face. Now you can use your flood icing to do her face, but because this is such a small surface area, I want it to have that puffy texture. So I'm actually going to go in with my outline. I'm going to squeeze that thick, and I'm going to really build up this icing. So there's my first pass, but now I have my bag. I'm putting the bag in the icing, and I'm jiggling it as I'm adding more volume. And you can see how it's smoothing in on itself as I'm adding it. So we're just tapping that icing, adding icing as we're going. And then there's her face. Give it a nice little jiggle, but it smoothed out really well on its own. So I'm not going to mess with that. I'm just going to leave it go. Okay, now we're going to go in with her second wing. So I have my white. I'm going to bring it down. Now I'm going to outline against her dress. We're going to do her dress in the next step. So I'm going to bring this down because her wings are sitting behind her. So there's our dress there. I'm going to bring this over here. Now that wing is already there. I don't need to outline against that. I can just go in and push the flood right up against there. And because that's crusted over, it's not going to blend. We're going to keep that distinction between the two wings. I'm going to bring this down over and flood that in. Now with my scribe, I'm going to just gently shape up this wing, push it so that it connects to that other wing. And shape up this bottom area. Okay, so there's our next step here. So we want to let this crust over, and then when we come back, we'll work on some more layers. Okay, let's start working on our mushroom house. We're only doing one small little detail here. We are going to add the door. That's the only thing we're doing in this step. So we want to get that door in first, and then when we come back, we are going to do the house itself. Okay, but we need this in and crusted before we add the rest of the house. So I'm just adding a little bit of brown line right across here in the middle. And then I'm going to bring this up, arch it at the top, close it in, and then because it's a smaller detail, I am going to fill it in with my outline bag just so it can maintain that nice puff without looking too deflated. So I am squeezing, adding that icing. I'm putting that bag in the icing as I'm jiggling it, helping it settle in on itself. Okay, I'm going to give that a little shake. And then with my scribe, I'm going to just shape up this bottom line here. Okay, that is all we are doing in this step. Okay, coming back to our snail, we want to get our blue body in here. So this is actually a wet on wet technique. If you can see these purple polka dots, we are going to build that directly into the flood. So first we are going to grab our blue outline, and we are going to outline the shape of his body. So I'm going to start right here where that tan left off. I'm going to bring that up here. And then we're going to follow this black line up. Now I'm lifting up this bag. I want to follow the edge of that cookie. I'm going to bring it on top of that white just a little bit, and I'm going to circle around and touch the tan over on this side. Now with our blue, we are going to go right in. We're going to squeeze that flood. We're going to follow that outline. Build up his face. Now I want this blue to sit over that tan just a little bit. So to do that, I am going to squeeze this blue firm so that a lot of icing is, you see how thick that icing is coming out? It's coming out and it's just peeking over that tan a little bit. I'm going to bring that down and I'm going to pull to taper. So I was able to fill that in with one pass. Okay, I'm going to take my scribe, soften up that part right there. I'm going to rotate this up just a little bit, shape up his head. Just a little bit right there. Now we don't want to spend too much time perfecting this blue because we want to take our purple flood, and then with our purple flood, I always like to take my napkin and squeeze that crusty bit off. As the bags are sitting there, it always dries a little crusty ball on there. So I like to get that off before I go in with my wet on wet designs. Now with your purple, I want you to squeeze the bag just a little bit, let a bead of icing come out. And then very vertical to the cookie, I want you to touch the blue and lift straight up. The blue is going to draw that polka dot out. Okay, so squeeze a little bit, touch, lift, touch, lift. And then if you want to do little baby polka dots, you can just barely touch it. And little ones will pull out. Now if they're peeking out like this, see how they're sitting above the blue? Take your scribe and just gently poke the center of them encourage them to settle down into that blue. Let them melt right down in there. Okay, and then if you have a little peak, so I have that little peak sitting right there. I have a clean scribe, and I'm gonna go in and I'm barely gonna touch it. I'm just going to tap a little bit and then see how that disappeared. Okay, so there's the blue body of our snail. Okay, we're gonna put him back in front of the fan and let that crust over so that we can move on to our shell. Okay, moving on, we are gonna work on our watering can. So right here, you can see the shape of it. So the first thing I want to do is build out the body of the can. So right here, we can see this, we can visualize this line right here. Okay, so start here, I'm gonna tap, lift, bring that straight down to here. There's our first line. I'm gonna tap, I'm gonna bring this across the bottom, tap here. I'm going to build the spout here. So let's bring this over. Now I don't want to go over too much. So where this line is, let's follow it up, and that's where I want this line to end. Okay? So I'm going to touch here. I'm going to bring this out over here. I'm going to outline the top here. Then I'm going to bring this here. Again, we have this line here, and I'm going to bring it up, close it off. Okay. Over here, I have the handle. So we're going to do 2 passes with the outline. I'm going to touch here. We're going to outline the outermost edge. Bring that down. Then we're going to do a second pass. Follow that shape, and then there's the shape of our handle. Okay, now with our blue, let's get in and flood the body of this watering can. So I'm going to start here, squeeze, let it touch that line. I'm going to bypass the handle for now. I want to get this larger section flooded first. In any areas that look a little skimpy, I'm just going in there and adding a little bit extra flood. Okay, so there's the flood. I'm going to take my scribe, give it a little jiggle, and really sharpen up these edges here. Okay, so there is the body of the watering can. Now with the flood, I'm going to fill in this handle. So I'm going to squeeze here. And I'm going to squeeze just thick enough that I can fill this in. Touch, and then I'm going to do a second pass. And then with my scribe, I am going to force this in. Let it blend in directly with the body of the watering can. Okay, I'm going to tap this, let it blend in. Okay, and there is our watering can. Okay, we're going to let this crust over, and then we can build our flowers when we come back. Okay, Okay, circling back, we are going to work on our mushroom house. So let's take our tan outline. And the first thing I want to do is build that window right above the door. So we want this pretty centered. I'm going to do a circle right above the door. Okay, and then I'm going to build a T inside of this circle. So lift, tap over here, tap over there. So there's our window. Now I want to outline the house. So I'm going to start right over here. I'm going to bring this down. Now we don't want to go under the door, so I'm just going to touch this bottom edge right here. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Outline and touch this edge. And then I want this a little bit rounded up here, so I'm going to touch here. I'm going to bring this up just a little bit and then touch the other side. Now with our tan flood, we're going to go straight into flooding. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to bring this over, down. I'm squeezing this thick. Once I get to the door, I'm going to squeeze this thick, let it push up against that door, and then come over. I'm going to follow through over here. And now I want to get this window outlined. Okay, so there's my window. Now that outline consistency is thicker, so it's going to keep that flood from spilling over so that we don't lose that window. And then I'm going to fill in this side over here. Okay, I'm just going to fill in this area here. Then with my scribe, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a shake. And then we're going to go in and help these little bumps settle into the icing. Okay, so there is the house on the bottom. Okay, so you can see the dimension here with the pink and the purple. So we're going to let this crust over, and then we're going to start with the roof of the house. Okay, we are going to start on our garden door. So in this step, we want to add the edible moss, but the first thing I want to do is lay the outline for my door. So I have my brown outline here. Now we're not going to come all the way from this side to this side because we have the flowers there. So this door is actually going to be a little bit more narrow. So we're going to start here. And I'm going to bring that over to about here. Now we're going to do the arch. We're going to build this door. I'm going to tap, lift my bag so I have a nice steady flow of icing. I'm going to round that off up top. And then I'm going to bring this down. And I'm going to touch to detach. Okay, so there's the size of my door. Now, if you don't like what the door looks like, scrape it off with your scribe or a napkin and rebuild it, okay? Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my green flood and just on this upper portion here, I am going to pipe some green flood, and then with my brush, I am going to paint this outward. Now I want this green to be a little bit thicker because we want the edible moss to have something to stick to. And that's okay if this is a little bit sloppy. We want this a little bit thicker than what we did on the watering can or the mushroom house, okay? We need some volume in this painted bit right here. Now we don't want this to dry too quickly, so once you get this covered, I'm just going to add a little bit here because it's starting to dry. And I'm just going to put a little bit right here. This is going to be the backdrop to our flowers. Okay, once I have this, here's my edible moss. I'm just going to press this in. Okay, so here is what that edible moss looks like. Now, if you have some big chunks that you don't like, we could just scrape those out. And anything that's coming over into this door territory, we want to take that out as well. So I'm just going to shake that little bit of excess out, but I'm really happy with that. That looks really good. I kept the shape of my door. I'm just going to get some of these crumbs out. And now the shape of my door is ready. In the next step, we are going to flood this door. Okay, I'm going to get these crumbs out here. That's where my flowers go, so I don't really want edible moss here. But I am going to put a little bit of green as a backdrop to my flowers in the next step. So there's just a little bit of green there. And just a touch of green over here. Okay, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. But like I said in, previous steps, I just like some icing behind if I know it's going to show through a little bit. So here is our prepared cookie. Got the edible moss up top, and then we'll be able to get that door flooded in the next step. Okay, we are back with our fairy. We're going to do a couple things in this step. First, we're going to take our purple and we are going to add her first shoe. So we're going to do it on this one right here. So I'm going to come up just a little bit over her foot. I'm going to bring that down here. And it's really just an oval. And we're going to fill that in. We're going to tap and fill. Okay, nothing too crazy here. Just that one little shoe. Okay, the next thing we want to do is add her hair. So we're going to take our brown outline. And I'm going to start right here and outline this edge. Lift. And we're going to do this whole top right here. Here's her bun. And we're going to bring it down here. That's as much as I'm going to outline. And then we're going to go in with the flood. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to bring that up over her wing. We're going to fill this in. Right here, I'm going to squeeze so that it comes up over her face just a little bit. And I'm tapping. I'm going to just gently bring just a little bit of that flood. We don't want to do too much because we don't want it spilling down the side of the cookie. Now I'm going to bring this over here and fill in the rest. Okay, so there's her hair. Now we're going to just shape it up a little bit. So I'm going to rotate this out. I'm going to soften up this curl right here. Just bring that down. Round out the edges up top here. And then we have this little bit of a gap right here behind her head by the wing. Just going to fill that in just a little bit. Okay, using our tan outline, we want to give her a little nose. So right center in her face, we're just going to squeeze a little bit and lift. We don't want a big nose. We just want a little button nose. And then if it peaks up a little bit, just take your scribe, gently tap just to soften up that little nose. Okay, the next thing we want to do is add the pink to her dress. So here I'm going to take my pink outline. I'm going to outline the bottom of, or that line right there. I'm going to outline that line. I'm going to bring this over. I'm going to bring this here, and then we're going to outline all of the curves of the bottom of this dress. Now we want to bring this up over her legs, so it gives the appearance that her legs are under the dress. And then I'm going to bring it to the wing there. I don't need an outline against that wing. We're going to go right up against that with the flood. So now with our flood pink, we're going to squeeze, let it touch that white. We're going to follow the curve down here, bring this up, and then fill out her dress. Okay, now with my scribe, I want to shape up this dress here. Now see how when I squeezed that pink, I had it coming up just a little bit over that white, you know, just to give it some of the dimension to make it look like the wing is behind her dress. Now here I want to really shape up the shape of this dress. So I'm bringing this up over her legs, making that outline disappear. Rounding that out, and then there is the bottom of her dress. So I'm actually going to come up over here just a little bit. You can see how it comes over here. I'm just going to cut over on top of this wing just a little bit. I just took my flood and I just extended that a little bit up top. Okay, so now that dress is really sitting on top there. And now I'm going to just gently feather that in so that it settles in with the rest of the flood. So you can see that looks much better. Okay. Now, because this outline is thicker and it's been a couple minutes while I worked on those other sections, I'm actually going to go in and add this other shoe. So I'm going to bring this in and just make this other shoe right on top. It's just that oval, like teardrop shape. We're just extending just a little bit over that first shoe. Okay. Okay, and there's her 2 feet. Okay, so she's really coming together. There's just a few more steps to finish this design, but we want her to crust over a little bit, and we'll be back in a few minutes to finish some of these other details. Okay, we are back with our flower cookie. this white is well crusted here. So we want to do these petals in sections. So there's 6 petals. We're only doing 3 in this section, and then we're going to let them dry for a little bit, and then we will come back just so that they keep their distinction here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is put a dot. I have my pink outline here. Put a dot right in the center. That is the center point of my flower. So now what I want to do is build out every other petal. So we're going to start with this one right here. I'm going to bring this up. Now I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. I want some of that white to shine through behind there. So these are going to be a little bit smaller than the actual shape of the cookie. So there's my first petal. I have that pink outline. Now I'm going to go in with my flood, and we are going to fill in this petal. I'm going to take my scribe, shape up and smooth this petal. We want to lose the appearance of that outline. You can see how that disappeared right in there. Okay, so we have that one. We're going to skip this one. Now we're going to build this one down here. Now this one and this one, you don't have the perfect shape here because it gets lost over here. But we have a little bit of the shape. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to bring this down here, not all the way. I'm going to go up, curve it over. It's kind of like the appearance of a soft heart. Okay, now with the pink flood, we're going to go right in and we are going to flood that. Okay, shape this up, force that flood to blend in with that outline. You want to lose that outline shape. Okay, we're going to skip this one. We're going to do this one right here. Okay, we're going to start here. I'm going to bring this over. Bring that in. And then fill that out. Same thing, go in with your scribe. And shape up that petal. Okay, so what I want to do now is I actually want to go in and add the greenery here. We can do that in this step, and then when we come back, we can build the petals on top of that here. So I'm going to start about right here, because then I know that this next petal, it'll be hidden. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to curve this out. I'm going to lift up this bag so I get a nice piped line. I'm going to bring that down. I'm slowly descending, and I'm tapping to disconnect. So there is the stem. And then I'm going to do 2 other stems here. I'm going to start here, and I'm going to bring it up here for this one. And then start here, and I'm going to bring it up here for this one. Now I'm going to start building my leaves. Okay, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to build out the shape of this leaf, curve it up, and bring it down over here. Same thing here. Same thing over here. Follow the shape of the cookie, bring that over here. Okay, now I have a flood green. I actually have It's not a true flood consistency. It is a little bit thicker than a typical flood just because these details are smaller. I needed it to keep some shape so that it didn't completely flood out. So now I'm going to fill in these leaves. I'm tapping the icing as I'm adding it and gently bringing this up and pull to taper. Same thing over here. Fill, pull to bring that to a peak. Same thing over here. Fill it up. I'm tapping as I'm adding volume. I'm working this out to the edge and pull to taper. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side here. So I'm going to start up here, and we have the shape of a couple of these leaves right here. So I'm going to start here, down, close that up there. I'm going to do some smaller ones here. And this one's really small, so I'm just going to take my outline. I'm going to squeeze, and as I'm tapping, I'm going to just walk this icing up and pull to taper. I can do that with this one too. This one's pretty small. So I'm going to fill this in. I'm tapping as I'm shaping it up, and I'm going to pull to taper. Squeeze. Okay, this is the thicker flood bag. Okay, so there are my leaves. Okay, so that is it for this step. We're gonna let this crust over really well, and then when we come back, we're gonna finish out those petals. Okay, let's build the shell to our snail. So let's grab our pink outline, and we are going to outline the shell of our snail. We're going to bring that up, lift that bag up, and we're going to bring this down until it touches his back. Okay, now we're going to take our pink flood, and we are going to squeeze thick so that it touches that blue with a nice smooth line, and we are going to follow that through, up and around. Squeeze so it touches that outline. We're going to bring this in. We're going to go quicker. And now I have my icing bag. I'm just going to add a little bit of volume to where it looks a little skimpy. Okay, now with my scribe, a very gentle wiggle. We don't want to go too hard. We don't want these other crusted areas to crack. So now I'm just going in softly and rounding out those edges. Okay, so there's his shell. And then while we're here, I'm going to add these antennas. So let's grab our purple outline, and we're going to start at his head, and we're going to lift and angle this out this way. Same thing here. We're going to touch, lift, and angle it out the other way. And then we're going to put these two little antenna balls up here. So I'm squeezing, I'm tapping to let it settle. Same thing over here. Squeeze, rotate that up, tap, let it settle. Okay, so that's all we can do in here. In our next step, we're actually going to finish off the snail. We just have this swirl inside of his shell and just this outer part right here where it connects to his body. Okay, we are back with our mushroom house. We're going to start building the roof. So let's take our pink outline. We are only doing this section in this step. So we have a pretty wavy line. So what I want to do, I'm going to start here. I'm going to loop this down to about right here. And then over here, I'm going to start here. I'm going to loop this down. I'm going to stop that right about here. And now I'm going to do a wavy line. You don't have to follow my design. You can do any wavy line. If you really want to get super wavy or just rounded, you can do any shape you want. So I'm going to start here again. I'm going to come down, bring this up, bring it down, a little wave here, and touch. Now I'm going to go in with my pink flood. We're going to squeeze, bring that down to the outline, follow that line up, bring it here, and then I want to squeeze thick against that house, let it come up just a little bit. I want it to look like the roof is extending over the house. I'm just building up that icing volume here. And there is the pink of our roof. I'm going to soften up some of these edges, round that up a little bit. I'm going to shape this. It didn't quite come down as far as I wanted. So I'm going to take this icing, rotate in a circular motion, push that out to that bottom edge. Okay, so there is the pink. Now while we're here, I'm going to take my brown. I'm just going to add a little doorknob right there. Okay, and then we're going to take our green outline and we're going to add some grass. So we're going to start right here on the bottom. We're going to squeeze, pull, and taper. Squeeze, pull, and taper. You can do little blades, big blades. You could pull them out to the left, pull them out to the right. You don't want a uniform look. You want them, crisscrossing, little short ones, some tall ones. We're going to bypass the door. Then we're going to pick up over here on this other side. Squeeze, pull, squeeze, pull. And then if you want to go in with another layer, you can. Okay, so there is the grass on the bottom of our mushroom house. Okay, we're going to let that pink crust over, and then when we come back, we are going to finish off the house with our purple. Okay, circling back to our garden door, we are going to take our brown flood, and in this step, the only thing we are doing is filling in that door. So we already have our outline. We are going to squeeze this flood right up against that outline, and we are going to fill it in. Now that outline is dry, so it will show a little bit, but as I'm squeezing this brown, I squeeze it so that it peaked up just a little bit over the top of it, just to help make it disappear. Okay, so there is our door. Now I'm just going to shape it up just a little bit. I'm going to soften up the roundness up here. And just fix this line so it's a little bit straighter down here on the bottom. So that's spilling just a little bit. So I'm going to take my scribe, I'm just going to cut that up just a little bit, just to take some of that excess off. And then I'm going to fix that up a little bit. Just going to take this icing and just drag it down so that it's straight. So what I did there was some excess and it was starting to pool over. So I just took some of that out and then reshape it. So now you can see I have a nice straight line. Okay, we are back with our watering can. And the first thing we want to do is get some of our green leaves in here. So we have a couple different shapes of flowers here. We have these daisy looking ones. We have some swirly roses and then some squiggle pink ones. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is get some of this green work in here. I like to get the green in first and then build my flowers on top. And then once I get my flowers in and they're crusted over, if I need to go in and fill in any negative space, I can go in and add some leaves, you know, really build up that dimension. So first layer is some stems for the leaves. So I'm going to start here. And I'm just going to build up a couple of them. Not much. And this is a pretty open canvas here. You can put them anywhere you like. And then I'm going to build some leaves out. So I'm squeezing and I'm pulling them out. Squeeze, pull. Squeeze, pull. So we're just going to fill in some area with some leaves. Now I want these big ones to come drooping over. So I'm going to start here on the edge. I'm going to squeeze really big. I'm going to tap and I am going to drag this down. As I'm tapping, I'm adding a little bit of icing and I'm going to pull to taper. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm squeezing, and all of this is with the outline consistency. Squeeze, add icing, walk this down, pull and taper. I'm going to do some little ones here. Squeeze, tap, pull. Squeeze, tap, and pull. I'm going to bring some over here in this white area. Okay, so there's my first layer of greens. Now I want to go in and start building some flowers. All of this is going to be the outline consistency, no flood in this area. Okay, so let's add a purple daisy here. So I'm going to squeeze. Now instead of squeezing and bringing out, I'm going to squeeze and bring it in. So squeeze here and then in. Squeeze, pull, squeeze, pull. Squeeze, pull. Okay, there's one purple flower. I'm going to do one here. Squeeze, pull, squeeze, pull. Let's add one right here. Squeeze, pull. Okay, now as you can see, I'm spacing them out so none of them are touching. Give it a couple seconds to crust over, and then, you know, eventually they're going to start touching. But because it's the outline, they are going to crust quickly, you know, so we don't need to have too much dry time in between. We can get all of these flowers in this step. Now we're going to do these pink ones over here. These are just squiggles. So just kind of loosely squiggle them around, build that up. Now we don't want to tap because we don't want them to settle in on themselves. We just want to build up some squiggles. Okay, that's the only thing we want to do there. We don't want to help those settle in. We want to see those distinct lines. I have some over here too. So just back and forth, whatever creates that squiggle look. Okay, now we have our yellow. Now for the yellow flowers, what I like to do, they look like little roses. So I'm going to take my yellow, I'm going to build up a big mound of icing. So I'm squeezing, building it up, tap to let it smooth. I'm going to do one right here too. Tap to let it smooth. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is touch here, and I'm just going to do a squiggle around and bring it into the inside here. Okay, there is my first one. I'm going to go around, build this in. Now you see the importance of why we cut such small holes in the outline bags. If these were cut any bigger, these would be very chunky. We want these little dainty details. Okay. Now these purple have been sitting here for a minute or two, so now we could add the center, the yellow center to our purple flowers. Okay, so that's about as many flowers as I'm going to add. So looking at this, I can see some negative space. So what I want to do is, now I'm going to go in and I'm going to fill it in with some greens. Okay, so like right here, for example, those greens, these two, they're just hanging out and they're not connected to anything. So I'm going to fill this in so that it looks like it's connected to these guys right here. Same thing right here. I'm going to bring that in. Then it's very heavy with the green up here, so I want to balance that out. And now we can add some leaves up top here. Go under the yellow icing and just add some greens, break up some of those flower colors in here. Okay, and there is the top of our watering can with our flowers. Okay, only one small little detail to add. We're going to take our blue outline and we are going to add this outline right here. So we're just going to follow the shape of the spout. So we're going to start here. We're going to lift and we're just going to build an oval. Okay, and there is our watering can. This is our first complete cookie in the set. Okay, let's add some more details. We're getting there. She's almost finished. So let's take our purple outline and let's add the top to her dress. So we're just filling in this space right here. We're going to come up over her neck just a little bit, and then we're going to pass over that black, really fill in this, bring up that volume. Now we want that black line to disappear, so make sure you bypass that black so that it is hidden underneath this icing. And we're just going to fill this in, bring it back to this wing, into this shoulder area. Okay, and all of that is using the outline consistency. It's such a small area, we don't need the flood there. Okay, now we're going to add her headband. So you can see this bump right here? That is where her headband goes. So this right here is her bun. This bump right here is her headband, and then right here are her bangs. So again, we're using just the outline. I'm going to start here. I'm going to rotate that out, and I'm going to bring that completely across to this side, and then I'm going to close that up there. So there's the shape of her headband there, and then we're going to squeeze and fill this in. We're going to do a couple passes. We need some volume here because it is the outline consistency. So I did about 3 passes. Now I'm tapping, adding just a little bit as I go, allowing that to settle in on itself. We're not tapping too hard because we do not want that brown crust to crack. So now I'm going in with my scribe, just gently teasing these bumps down so that they can settle down into the icing, get that nice and smooth. Okay, then we have this little bow here. So I'm going to touch here. I'm going to bring that out and loop it in here. And then we're going to do that on the other side, down, loop, and bring it here. Okay. We do have to add this knot, but we're going to let that crust over for a minute. By the time we're done with her hair, we'll be able to add that in. Okay, so let's add her bun. So we got this twirly bun right up top. So I'm going to start right here. I'm going to bring this out, lift up this bag, follow the outside, and then bring this in, and we're just going to swirl it until you can't swirl it anymore. Okay, there's her bun swirl. Now we're just going to give her a couple wispy hairs. Okay, we're going to start here, outline her bangs, lift up that bag, bring that down. I'm going to do the same thing right here, follow this shape of her face. We're going to follow that shape again, down this side. I'm just going to add a little line here just to shape up the rest of her hair. Okay, I'm just going to take my scribe. I had a little icing that's coming over the edge here. Just going to gently detach those. Okay, now I'm going to take my purple outline and I'm just going to add that knot. We're going to be gentle, that's still pretty wet. So I'm just going to circle, bring that height up, tap to let it settle. Okay, now this was outline consistency here, so I'm going to go right in and add her arm. So right here, this meeting point right here, here's her neck, here's her wings. This is where her arm is going to go, and you can see that it's coming out. So I'm going to bring this up. Here's her shoulder. And I'm going to angle it down, follow the shape of the dress. And then it's going to get thinner towards the bottom. So let's focus on her arm first. Now I'm going to fill it in. This is all using the outline consistency. I'm filling this arm in, squeezing. A couple passes just to have some volume so that it could settle in and be nice and smooth. I'm taking my scribe just to help this along. I'm going to round out that shoulder just a little bit. Okay, there's the arm. And we're just going to add a little hand. So I'm going to touch here and bring that out for her thumb. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here, but just a little bit bigger for the rest of her fingers. Okay, then I'm going to tap and just let it blend in with her wrist here. And there's her arm. Okay, she's almost finished. The only thing that we need is her eyes and her mouth. Now, this is still very wet. Typically, I would wait 24 hours before I would attempt to draw on the icing. So we're going to let this dry. I'm going to finish out the set and then we're going to try to add those details. But you at home, I want you to wait at least, 24 hours, because even though if it looks dry, going in with a fine tip marker like this, just a little bit of pressure is going to crack that icing. And we put a lot of work into this fairy and we don't want to ruin her face by cracking that icing. So wait at least, minimum 18 hours, preferably 24, before you do any marker detailing on your cookies. Trust me, I've ruined countless cookies because I wasn't patient enough. So let her dry and then we'll come back later and add those details. Okay, we're back with our flower. We're going to add the rest of these petals and look how nice this puff is maintaining itself. You can see how nice that puff is. Now, while I work on these petals, I'm just going to talk about that puff for a minute here. Okay, so in the cookie world, we always want our details to have a puffy appearance. Craters, holes, that's a very common issue with cookies. And it all comes down to your technique. Now, the way that I combat that is this white is crusted, not dry. And the reason why is there's still moisture in that flood. So when you add these details, these nice puffy details up top, because there's moisture in that flood, it's going to leave it alone. It's going to stay puffy and it's not going to try and take that moisture. Now, let's say you let that white crust over and dry for, 24 hours and it was completely dried through. Now you're coming back and you're adding these details. Well, now there's moisture in it. That base flood, because it's dry, it's going to want that moisture. It's going to suck the moisture out of your details and pull it into the dried flood. And then that's where you get that crater because it sucks it down. So if you do it on when it's crusted, it has its own moisture, so it's going to leave it alone. It's not going to want it. Now, another key part in that, if you're doing puffy details, you also want a thicker icing. A thicker icing, it has, a stronger structure. So it's going to, stay puffy. Now, there are times like here that I do use my flood, but I naturally have my flood at a thicker consistency. I like it thicker because I have better control over the icing and it doesn't spill out all over the place. I can still, do a smaller shape and still have control where it's not running away like water. Okay. And you'll see in times where there's times where I use my outline for little puffy details, but it all depends on the size. Now these petals are a little bit larger, so I'm going in with my flood, but smaller things like, these little guys, I can get away with using my outline. And another tip to keep that puff. Once you are done getting these puffy details, put it immediately in front of the fan, because that fan is going to quicken that crust and it's going to lock that icing in shape. Okay, so 3 tips for you. Crusted base, not dry. Thicker icing for your details, not super wet. and immediately in front of the fan to quicken the crust and lock in those details. Okay, so here's the final petals here. Okay, this yellow, typically I would let this crust over, but this yellow is pretty thick, so I'm actually just going to go in right now and I'm going to add this center. So the yellow, we're going to build this out big enough so that it covers the meeting place of all of the petals. Okay, so I'm going to build that up and I'm tapping as I'm adding a little bit of icing, letting it smooth in. Okay, so there is our flower. Okay, let's finish off our snail. So here we're going to do the swirl and we're going to do the purple part of the shell right here. Okay, so we're going to start the swirl here. Now, I'm going to lift up my bag pretty high because I like to see where that line's going to lay. And as long as I'm keeping a steady pressure, I could hover for a second so that I can plot where that line goes. Okay, so I'm going to start here. I'm going to touch, let it anchor, and I'm going to lift it up. You can see that height, and I'm just going to bring this up, follow the shape of the shell up here. I got a steady pressure, and I'm going to swirl into the center. Now as I'm coming into the center of the shell, I'm bringing that icing down so that I could come in here and tap to detach. Okay, so there's the shell swirl. And then the last thing we need right here is this part, like the entrance of the shell, like where it connects to the snail. So what I want to do is start here. I'm going to bring this up into this space right here. I'm going to bring it down, touch that blue. And I'm going to follow that line where the blue meets the pink. That's the line that we want to follow here. Now with the purple outline, I'm going back and forth, really build up this volume. We want a lot here. Okay, now I'm tapping. I'm adding icing as I'm tapping, allowing it to settle. Okay, I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. And then finish off this detail with my scribe. I'm just going to feather this just a little bit. Tap. Allow it to settle. Okay, same thing goes here. Like I said, with the fairy, we want this to dry for a good 24 hours, but just for the sake of finishing off this cookie, I'm going to attempt to just do this tiny little eyeball very gently. I'm going to take my fine tip side and we're just going to do a circle, a little dot for his eye. Now, if you're gentle enough, you can pull it off, but I highly recommend you let that sit overnight before you add that detail. Okay, so here's our snail. We finished him off. Okay, we're back with our mushroom house. We are going to add our finishing touches here. So I'm here with my purple outline. I'm going to outline the rest of the house, or the roof up top here. I'm going to close up the top of that cookie. And I'm going to go in straight away with my purple. I'm going to flood this, bring that up top, let it touch that outline. We're going to squeeze thick against this pink so that it connects with the pink. And this is also a wet on wet design here, so we are going to move a little bit quicker. Going to rotate this icing out. Shape it up against the line here. Okay, now with our pink flood, we are going to add polka dots. Okay, so I have just a little bit of a spillover here. I'm going to rotate this and I'm going to show you how I handle a spillover. It's not that bad. It's really just this right here. So when it's a fresh spill, I take my scribe vertical and I run the scribe against the cookie, and then it takes off the spill. And then I could soften that up and it's a perfect line. You don't even see that it spilled over. Okay, so let's add these polka dots. So here's our pink flood. We are going to very vertical to the cookie. We're going to squeeze it out just a little bit. We're going to squeeze, pull straight up, squeeze, straight up. Now we're going to do different sizes. Okay. We're going to squeeze here. And then we're going to squeeze over here. Okay, now these are sitting up a little bit. So now I'm going to take my scribe and I'm just going to gently poke these down, let them melt down into the flood here. Okay, and there is our mushroom house. Okay, let's finish off our garden door. So I'm here with my brown outline, and we are going to pipe these lines. So the first thing I want to do is touch here in the corner. I'm gonna lift, pull, I'm going to circle around up top. I'm going to bring that down and I'm going to tap here in the corner to detach. Now I'm going to touch this line here. I'm going to lift, pull across, and tap to detach. Now I like my lines to look center, so I like to do my center line first and then build out from it. So find your center point. Up top, we're going to gently tap this line. I'm going to lift and pull this line straight down. Going to tap to detach. I'm going to do 2 more lines. We're going to touch here, lift, tap to detach. 1 more line here. Now, if you don't really like line work or you're pretty new to line work and it's a little bit wobbly or shaky, you could forego this step. You don't need to add these lines if you are not comfortable, or I recommend the outline consistency practice video that I have here on YouTube. A lot of great pointers on how to get straight lines and getting familiar with outline consistency bags. It just takes practice. It's a tricky consistency to get used to, but once you figure out the right consistency and you get yourself familiar with it and you're practicing it and you're using it more and more, it just becomes second nature with this consistency. So I recommend that video if you're still struggling with this particular consistency and pulling straight lines. Okay, so here I have the doorknob. I just circled, brought that up, tapped to let it settle. Okay, now on the sides, we are going to add some flowers. So I have my green outline bag here. First thing we're going to do is add some stems. So I'm going to do one here right against the door. I'm going to add another one right here. Then we're going to do the same thing over here. Here's one here. And we're going to angle this one up here, do another one here. And then we're going to go in and add our flowers. Everything's going to be outline consistency. We need that thicker consistency here. So starting with this purple one, we're going to create a ball of icing here, and then we're going to pull to the center. Squeeze, tap, pull to the center. I'm going to do that a couple times, just build out the shape of that flower. There's one. We're going to do the same thing over here. Okay, now it's going to start up here over the door. Might be a little bit awkward to get that angle. We're going to build it up over this door. Okay, there's another purple flower. Now we are going to build some little pink roses. Okay, I'm going to do a circle here, bring that volume up. Same thing right here, bring that volume up. I'm going to let that sit for a second before I do the swirls. Okay, swirl, bring that up. Same thing here. Tap, let it settle. One right here. Bring that up, tap, let it settle. I'm going to let those sit for a minute and then I'll come back, do those swirls. Then I'm going to build some yellow daisies. I'm going to do the same thing as we did with the purple. I'm going to squeeze, pull, squeeze, pull, squeeze, pull. We're meeting in the center. There's a yellow one. I'm going to do another one right here. Squeeze, pull. Okay, now I'm going to take that pink and I'm going to finish off these little roses. So I'm going to start here and I'm just going to swirl around, just one little swirl. Here, swirl it around and bring it in. Same thing right here. Same thing right here. Okay. Now let's take our yellow. We're going to build the center of the purple flowers. I'm going to take the pink and just do a little dollop of pink in the middle of the yellow. And now I want to fill out the rest with some grass and some leaves. So let's start with the grass. Actually, I'm going to start with a stem here. This yellow flower does not have a stem, so I'm going to add one here. Then I'm just going to add some leaves. We're going to finish with the grass. Okay, just little guys. We're just filling in some of that space, break up some of that color. I'm going to rotate here. Same thing here. Add some here, right here. Okay, now I'm going to finish off with grass. So I'm going to start at the bottom, squeeze, pull, just like we did with the mushroom house, squeeze and pull. We're not going to go across the bottom of the door, squeeze, pull. And we can go back and add some more if you want some more height or some dimension on that, squeeze and pull. Okay, there is our fairy garden door. Okay, I'm going to add the eyes and the smile to my fairy. I'm going to be very gentle because she's not dry yet. So like I said before, please try to wait until tomorrow to add these details because it is a little bit risky to add this when they're still crusted, but we're going to try. So I'm going to gently, with my fine tip black marker, I'm going to start here. I'm just going to give her a little crooked smile here. Okay, and then I'm going to add her eyes right here. Okay, I'm just going to do 2 wispy little eyelashes. Sometimes doing this upside down gives you a better vantage point to get these on equally, the eyelashes and the eyeballs. Okay, so there is our fairy. Very stressful to do that when I know that icing is wet, but we pulled it off. Okay, and there's the last detail to our fairy. Okay, here is our final set. We have finished it, and I couldn't be more excited about how these look. I hope you enjoyed this class. I hope you learned a ton of new styles and techniques, and I hope that you've learned plenty. I would love to see your creations. If you can send me a message or comment in the post with your photo, I would love to see how they turned out. If you have any questions or any suggestions on how to make the class better, or if there's something that you didn't learn and you hope that I covered it, please let me know. I'm always looking for feedback to help make my future classes even better. And if you have suggestions on a future class, something that you would really like to learn, I'm always open and looking for new suggestions. Again, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm looking forward to next time. Thanks.